So obviously my name is Brent. A lot of familiar faces, recognize a lot of people in the audience. We're going to be going over a lot of the stuff that we're trying to accomplish with Debate at LinkedKey. Because I recognize a lot of people here and see a lot of familiar faces, I'm going to try and go quickly over some of the stuff that will bore you that you may already know. I will be there just in case people need access to some of that information, but I want to try and focus on how LinkedKey has grown, some of our accomplishments, and basically how we're looking into the future as well, because I think all that's very, very important. But yes, I'm Brent. Some of the resume bullet points will be on the slide at a certain point. Makes me uncomfortable, but you guys can all glare at that when that comes up if you prefer. But we're going to get started just in terms of some of the stuff that we're trying to do here at LinkedKey. So beginning, what is debate? And again, I will not bore you too much with the basics, but I do just want to kind of go over some of the general benefits of the activity. Basically, the thing that I always try to tell people about debating that separates debating from activities like public speaking, DECA, Model UN, or other kinds of activities is that it combines a set of skills in a very, very unique way, right? So public speaking, you learn to be more confident in front of an audience. You learn how to be able to speak and be able to present yourself, which is an absolutely really useful skill. At Model UN, you learn how to prepare based on international relations topics. DECA, very, very business focused. But what debate does is it forces people to engage in both public speaking and critical thinking simultaneously. Not only does it do that, but it makes students do it incredibly, incredibly quickly. They have to do it within a 15-minute span and still sound intelligent. That is not a very easy thing to accomplish, especially when you have to debate a motion that you know nothing about. There are some people in this audience who would have attended a tournament very recently at York Women's High School that had to debate with 15 minutes notice about combining the countries of the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and almost none of them knew anything about that topic and still did an amazing job. So debate forces you to basically think critically and try to combine all these kinds of skills. We learned a lot of different parliamentary styles in basically the different levels that we do here at LinkedKey. The main styles we learn are Canadian parliamentary and British parliamentary. I will not bore you with how those styles work. That is for class time. We also do World Schools Debate. Usually we start that at the higher levels, but all of these styles are covered in the class. So, and my technology.
No,
oh.
The laptop.
Sorry?
Hold that with the
Oh, the laptop. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay.
It doesn't work?
Yeah. Right. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So in terms of why we do debating, and again, we can just skip past this. I don't want to really spend too much time on exactly. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to spend too much time on like the different kinds of how the formats work, all those sorts of things. There are obviously two sides to debate. Students are forced to argue against one another, and they're forced to argue often on sides of issues that they completely disagree with, and again, know nothing about. And it's very useful to be able to actually accomplish those sorts of things. So, in terms of the kinds of skills that we can gain, I've already covered a couple of this. Critical thinking, public speaking skills, argument construction. Now, I actually want to talk about argument construction, and this will be a little bit relevant later on when I'm mentioning some of the benefits that debating can have going into the future. But one skill that a lot of debaters somewhat magically realize that they get from debate that they don't really understand happened until they actually start writing essays is that there's a huge crossover between the ability to form arguments in a debate speech and being able to write well and argue well on papers and be able to do that in a quick time span. I found that after joining the debate club when I was younger, we will not get into specifics about how long ago that was, that basically my essay writing massively improved, and the ability for me to be able to get good marks, even sometimes when I could have done a little bit more studying than I had done in reality, really, really improved. So all these things basically end up coming from engaging in debate, and we tailor our program to try and encourage basically development in all these skills. So a lot of things that we can get from debate. We also get a lot of opportunities, and this is sort of one thing that I want to focus on when talking about debating is that one of the real reasons I think debating is a great opportunity for students is because it's really, really difficult to get students to engage in academic type activities in a way that seems fun and engaging. But debating adds a level of competition and a level of socialization that makes it much more accessible for students to learn about stuff that sometimes is very boring. Learning about the basic, like as my students have been learning for the last 4 weeks, the history of American slavery is something that for many students can be pretty dry. But when you know that having knowledge about a topic like that can help you in your next debate, or that you might need to know that information if you don't want your partner to start yelling at you in a prep session, that kind of stuff can encourage a level of learning that isn't always available otherwise, right? So you get opportunities to travel. We've traveled all over the place, and we'll probably be doing a little bit more traveling in the upcoming year than we did last year because, there's a new program, and Queens had a weird sign up this year, so there was some issues that we weren't able to get done because student-run programs, but we were able to travel to Harvard, we were able to travel to London for tournaments, all different places in Ontario, and we expect to be able to still do that, and there's really great opportunities to travel and compete while doing debate. So, why debate with us specifically? And this is basically some of the accomplishments that we've had, and keep in mind that at least in terms of my tenure, I haven't been here very long, and in terms of my expectations for our first year, I'll be completely honest, I did not expect that we would have done this well, or that our students would have done this well, which speaks, in my opinion, to the amazing talent of some of the debaters that we have at LinkedKey. And in many ways, getting better at debating isn't just about, the old bearded guy that's yelling at the students to try and get them to be better. It's about the other students in a class helping and encouraging one another to be able to improve. So at the top here, we obviously had the Canadian Junior National Debate Champions. We also had 2 winners at Thornhill in terms of in 2018, Angie and Paul won that tournament. James was also a finalist. Quarterfinalists, Edward and Elaine. 5th speaker was James, 8th speaker was Angie, and the 9th speaker was Emily. Some of these debaters are in the audience right now and should be very, very proud of those levels of accomplishments. And what I'm particularly proud about in terms of how the students did at tournaments like these, and there are some other awards we'll go to continuing, is that some of these students haven't been to many debate tournaments. They haven't done a whole lot of debating at tournaments like the students that they're competing with. At some of these tournaments, they were debating against people who would have been at their 11th, 12th tournament, which can be pretty intimidating. So continuing on with the list of awards, 2018 Provincial Debate Champions, we had Amy was the champion, runner-up Grace and Heather, 2nd speaker Grace, and 5th speaker Heather. So we also competed at the 2018 York Women Debate Champions, where we had a semi-finalist of Grace, finalists for the junior category of Angie and Jessica, and other junior finalists in Elaine and Lindsay, as well as the 5th junior speaker in Grace, 10th junior speaker in Ruby. And then lastly, the 2018 Hard House Debate Tournament, 7th junior speaker, Grace, and the 2017 Thornhill Debate Tournament, we had the champion, Jacob, 1st junior speaker, Grace, 2nd junior speaker, Amy, and a quarterfinalist in Eric. So, and I'll keep going here, just because we have a lot of these awards, which again, I would not have expected in our first year. 2017 at UWO, this was our first tournament. This was the first tournament I attended with LinkedKey, and many of the students didn't know me and were a little shy speaking with me at this point, because I was just some, again, old bearded guy that had just come to start teaching them classes. So there was, at this point, a lot of this was on the students themselves. Quarterfinalists in Eric X and Darren, quarterfinalists in Larry and Minhall, and the 1st junior speaker in Amy. So, I mean, all those achievements, very, very impressive, I think. But for me, and just one other thing that I would mention from the last page is, we went to the Harvard tournament this year, the Harvard World Schools Tournament, which is one of the most competitive high school tournaments in the world, and has massive, massive competition. And our teams, especially considering one of our teams was the youngest team there, and the other team had literally never done world schools in any capacity. We had to teach them how the style worked before the tournament so that they could learn how to do that debate style, to debate against people who were literally on national teams planning on going to debate at world schools championships. And at that tournament, we had records of a 4-3 team, and for a team that was one of the youngest in the tournament, managed to pick up one win against people who were much older than them. So I was very, very impressed with basically everything that we accomplished so far. A lot of stuff to talk about there. So our coaching staff, you guys might be familiar with me. Some of you I will have met before. Obviously, my name is Brent. I've been teaching for 7 years. I'll get to that a little bit more. But what I'm really, really proud of is that really about the composition of our coaching staff. There is nobody that would coach any level of our classes, whether it's my classes that I teach personally, someone who comes to substitute for my class, or someone who is teaching usually at level 1 and level 2. Nobody who teaches those classes is ever going to be someone who doesn't know what they're doing or who doesn't have debate accomplishments. We purposely pick people that we think are qualified and that have experience and ability to teach at those levels, and we're really, really proud of the staff that we've composed. So, some stuff, I guess, in terms of like who I am and what I've done. Been coaching for quite a while. This is the 6 years of debate coaching experience, mostly just refers to the coaching that I've done at the coaching that I've been paid for. I've actually been coaching for longer than that, but before that I wasn't getting paid for it at the university level. That was more just volunteer kinds of stuff. But I've been doing this for a very, very long time. I also do university debate coaching, so I have a range. I've coached students as young as 8 or 9 years old, and I've coached students as old as, and yes, this might be odd to some of you, as old as 26, because people stay in debate for much longer than you would expect sometimes in university. So wide range in terms of basically the ranges of students that I've coached. The rest of the stuff you can see for yourself. I'm a bit bashful, so we'll just move on. Okay, in terms of our vision, basically we're trying to accomplish several things. And this program is going to continue evolving as we move on. Again, we're a younger program, at least since my involvement, and we want to try and make sure that every year that we're improving what it is that we do, learning from our students and seeing what can be done better. Our students will obviously learn the basics of debating. Frankly, I could teach the basics of debating in my sleep because I've just heard them so many times at this point that stuff students will know by the end of level 1, and then by the end of level 2, they should also be able to repeat them in their sleep, probably against their will, but even still, they should know all of that. But more importantly, students will also gain knowledge on a variety of different topics. This is something that I think is really important about debating. I try to have a diversity of different things to talk about. Some things that students won't like, some things that students will love, so that we have basically everybody's interests represented in debating. Third, our students will compete in debates that are both fun for the students and intellectually challenging. We really, really encourage students to sign up for tournaments. There are different kinds of tournaments that occur. We have tournaments targeted towards junior students, tournaments that are targeted towards senior students, but there are just so many debating tournaments throughout the year that we want students to get the ability to actually compete in these tournament settings, especially since there's so many available just in the general Toronto area that there's a lot of really good opportunities there. And I think this is one of the biggest advantages that we actually offer, especially in comparison to some competitors, is that not only do we attend tournaments, but I attend these tournaments with the students, which is an ability for me to be able to watch competitive rounds and give feedback to students after rounds, and also ensure that we're sending as many students as possible. We were sending on average somewhere between 6 to 9 teams to every tournament that we attended, to the point where LinkedKey became a name that people started recognizing just because it was up so many times on the tab that people had to know what that name was by the end of the year. So this is really, really important because while the class is great and while we get a lot out of the class, being able to actually compete against other students and engage in the activity in different cities is a really, really good experience, something that we try to fashion our program to be able to provide. And, okay. There was one more slide. I know there was one more slide. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe the screen going for.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'm talking too much.
Oh. There it is.
Okay. Yeah, so this last thing that I want to talk about is that we actually started something for the end of this month that I think that both myself and Henry are pretty proud of, and it's something that we really want to continue going into the future, where we know that it's sometimes difficult given that students have other kinds of commitments, that students, you know, maybe it's hard to be able to afford to travel to Harvard or to travel to London or to Montreal or different places to be able to attend a tournament. And we wanted to try and set up something here so that even the very newest of students in level 1 all the way up to level 4 senior, would have an ability to debate. And so we're starting a process of actually doing internal tournaments and having basically our students debate internally amongst themselves, but in a competitive setting. And one advantage that we're going to have over some high school tournaments is that I get to pick the judges, and I get to make the judges come, so I know the judges will be pretty good, which is not always the case at some other high school tournaments, that they're getting better. But there was a few this year that could have been a little bit better on the judging front. But our internal tournaments will have excellent quality of judging, and will give students a little bit of a less stressful atmosphere, especially if they have never attended a tournament at another institution before, to be able to simulate that and be able to get their first experience. And we basically try to run it at a pretty cheap cost so that people can afford it, so that it's not too onerous for attendance. So moving on from that, yeah, I'm not sure either.
Okay.
There's only a couple more slides, so.
Yeah, you can, maybe you can.
Yeah, okay, so in terms of other stuff, just basically just talking about debating in the future. There's the question that I get the most often, so I know I'm being bad with the camera, I'll try to stay a little bit more central, that's my apologies. One thing that I often get asked, and as a history major at school, I'm quite used to getting this question in a different capacity, is like, well, why should I care about debating, right? What good is debating gonna do for me? What good is debating gonna do for my son or daughter? Much the same thing I get about, well, why are you studying history? What kind of job are you ever gonna get doing that? What kind of degree is that? But in reality, there's a lot of benefits to debating, some of which are less obvious and some of which are a little bit more obvious. The less obvious benefits I've already kind of covered, which are the ability to be able to write better, right? Essay writing, I think that a lot of skills are generated from that. Basically just being comfortable in social settings. This is something that I mentioned at the beginning of level 1 when I've taught it, because I think it's really important, is people often underestimate the importance of being able to go into a social setting and talk to someone, even in a business setting, and be able to have a level of communication that is basically effective. And debate forces you to be able to do this in high pressure situations while having to discuss why China should or should not engage in a certain kind of tax program, right? So if you can do that in a debate, you can probably have a basic conversation with another human being about a business deal or something like that. So basic social skills, things of that nature. But in terms of some of the more hard, raw data about what this actually will help with in terms of university applications, and even after that in terms of job placements, debate is an activity that is respected among universities, among jobs, among a lot of different kinds of fields. So if you have something on your resume where it says that you've competed at a particular tournament, or that you can show that you have public speaking experience, that's something that schools value, especially in an age now where schools are starting to move more and more away from basing things just purely on grade averages, because schools know that grade averages, depending on where you go to school, can wildly vary. I can say with some confidence, almost every student that I've taught in this room had a much harder high school experience than me, going to school at a very rural place where people drove tractors to my prom, and if you got a 90, you were basically just the person in class doing your homework. So there is a degree of issues in terms of assigning that. So they need to look towards extracurriculars. They need to look towards seeing that students have engaged in other kinds of activities. And debate really, really provides opportunities to do that. And Doris and Jonathan are going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But even after school, you might already have known that there's some benefit to getting to be able to put, that I won a certain award on a resume for going to school, or that I was involved in a debate club, showing that your student is actually active outside of just doing homework and doing class. This is actually really useful for jobs. Law firms, particularly, like every single one of my friends is a lawyer to the point where it's actually kind of annoying. And law firms directly recruit from debate clubs. There are people who are in charge of recruiting at law firms that are themselves former debaters. So there are massive opportunities there. And though not a lot of people know it, the second most popular thing that debaters do after law is consulting. And a lot of consultants do also have a debate background. McKinsey literally shows up with a booth at the World University Debating Championship trying to hire debaters to come and work at their massively high-paid consulting firm because of the fact that they want to attract people who they see as being engaged in activities that are intellectually stimulating and show that they can work with others. These are activities that are actually valued. Boston Consulting Group is a group that 2 of my friends have been hired to work at. All of these kinds of different opportunities apply. There are also other kinds of opportunities in terms of, people go into all different types of field. There are many debaters there are some debaters I know that are currently in med school and debating, which is a little bit crazy to me how you could find time to debate and do med school, but lots of different kinds of fields that look at debate with a high level of respect. Right, and so that's basically it in terms of what we have here. Now I know that there might be some questions in terms of some more specifics about how we run levels, about the different kinds of things that we try to accomplish between the different classes, and all that stuff I'd be more than happy to talk about when we get to the question and answer period if you guys are curious about anything like that. But first I do want to pass it over to Doris and Jonathan. I'll have Doris speak first and then Jonathan afterwards. Doris is going to talk a little bit about, so I've coached Doris for a while now. I'll let Doris say the number because I'm forgetful. But I coached Doris in a previous occupation as well as individually while she was preparing for her Team China run. And Jonathan has his own unique successes in debating that I think are also incredibly valuable that I'll allow him to talk about. So Doris, I'll let you get started.
Oh, thank you. Is it? Okay. So you guys have probably heard of me speak before. I just did DECA, but now I'm back for debate. So it's just something else I do in high school that I think I really enjoyed. So my process of getting into debate, especially with Brent, I think was very valuable in terms of learning a lot of things and also for university applications as well. So when I was in grade 9, we have the 2 biggest club at Bayview, which is Bayview DECA and Bayview Debate. And the process of getting into Bayview Debate is similar to DECA, where it's decently competitive and you have to compete with a lot of people. And once I got into Bayview Debate, what I realized is that although it's great to be part of a school team, but at the end of the day, your school team is only there to do the administrative work. So they send you to tournaments, but the individual training has to come from yourself. And I learned that the hard way, which is in the first year, I went to Northern, which is one of the smaller tournaments, and I didn't prepare as much. So I got second last speaker. I could not do worse. It was bad. And because of that experience, I realized that you sometimes need a coach to guide you in certain ways. So that's why I went out to different tutoring centers and I found Brent. So Brent has been with me for 3 years, so it's been a long time. And during that time, I think what really helps in terms of having a private coach or having a coach towards a class is that he has your best interests in mind. If you go to a debate club and you attend a few tournaments, the teachers are just there to make sure you go to the tournament, right? How you do at the tournament has nothing to do with the teacher. They're just there to make sure you're safe. But if you have a private coach, they want you to do well. They want you to see you excel. So what Brent helped me a lot with is how to write notes, how specifically to do public speaking, and what tournaments to attend. And we even selected what tournaments to go to and how to prepare specifically for those tournaments. So I think in many ways, having something very specialized towards you and someone who wants you to do well is really, really great in terms of having a private coach. And I think one of the things I've done throughout high school is I'm not a Canadian citizen, and I'm a Chinese citizen. So for a while for me, I knew that Team Canada was out there, but I also didn't know that Team China existed until I went to different types of world school tournaments. And at the tournaments there, like Team China was also there. And then their coach just talked to me about like, oh, what do you feel like about like the national team? Have you ever thought about it? I didn't know that was a possibility until it was opened up for me. And then I went for a tryout with them, and then they were like, okay, great, you're on the team. So it was just the process of meeting other people and seeing other possibilities. Because if I didn't do debate, I wouldn't have known that China does debate either, or the fact that I'm a Chinese citizen, and that sometimes is a play, right? So I think in many cases, doing debate really helps with that. And I think the last part, in terms of college applications, is I think what separates debate from a lot of other clubs is that lots of universities have debate clubs too. And especially lots of like US Ivy League schools have debate teams, and they specifically recruit for those debate teams. Because I'm sure most schools want their debaters to do well, right? So when they're looking through university applications, they look for people who've done debate. They look for people who can do well in that specific field. And I think that helps a lot. So even if you're applying for a major that's business, we're applying for law, we're applying sometimes for medicine, as long as you can communicate yourself, I think that's a skill that applies to many different majors. And you can't really go wrong with debate, because even if you change your career path and you apply for something else in university, I think it still works very well to show the fact that you're able to communicate and talk to other people. So I think in general, what debate really helped me is to expand my worldview on learning about national teams, and also it helped a lot with university applications because I had a passion to talk about. I had something I really enjoyed, and I think they see that through you. They see hard work, and they see that debate is a good activity. So I think in general, like these are the benefits of debate, and like Brent's a really great teacher. So now I'm going to bring up Jonathan. He's on Team Canada right now. He has a lot of very, very interesting accomplishments, really great accomplishments, and he's going to talk about all of them.
Thanks, Doris. So I'll just give a really quick rundown of what school I go to, how I got involved in debate, and then we'll go through a little bit more about the logistics of how I applied to Team Canada, and then the entire tryout process. So I'm a grade 11 student, currently studying at the University of Toronto Schools, which is in downtown Toronto. I joined my debate society, I think in grade 8, the end of grade 8. And for our school, I think it's a little bit different from Bayview, but the way it works is that you actually have to try out for the society. Is that how it works at Bayview as well? Like you have a tryout. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you have to try out for the society, and what's different about UTS is that it's very competitive to actually attend tournaments. Because since there are only a limited amount of spaces given to people who do go to tournaments, it's around 4 to 5 teams for the large tournaments. What that meant was that I had to prepare, and I had to practice a lot in order to get even one of the spots on my school teams. This was when I was starting off, right, grade 9, even parts of grade 10. This was a problem that I had. And then moving my way, up the debate ranks, I guess you can call it that, at my school, I recognized that there was an opportunity out there. So instead of just representing my school for debate, I can also represent my country. And this was an opportunity I found out first from people I talked to, but then I really started developing an interest to applying to Team Canada through our head coach, who thought that I was a good candidate and actually sent me the application. So let me go through a little bit about how the application process works. Do you guys know? For anyone who doesn't know, there's a debating union in Ontario called the Ontario Student Debating Union, OSDU, and OSDU is headed by a board, and that board annually in around I don't know the exact time range, but it's around December. I think they send out a provincial application where it's a written application that you have to fill out, indicating your interests, but also your accomplishments, and some short answer questions for why you would want to be a part of Team. This is for students who may not have made the provincial tryouts, or who may have just forgotten that their province offered a tryout, but still wanted to apply to Team Canada. For this route, what you would do is you would send in a written application directly to the National Selection Committee, and they would choose based off of your merits and based off of your accomplishments whether they wanted to take you directly to the national tryouts. So this way you can bypass lots of the written application for the province, and also the primary provincial tryout that the majority of delegates had to go through. So yeah, that's basically a rundown of the logistics of how to apply, and then how they select Team Canada members. Just a little bit more about Team Canada as it currently exists. So it's a team of 12 to 14, I think, individuals who represent Canada to international tournaments. So these are tournaments like the Pan American High School Debating Champion or the World Schools Debating Championship. So they range from tournaments that are international, but also tournaments that span literally like tens of different countries. I think you can speak a little bit to the fact that WSDC has a bunch of different debaters from a bunch of different countries, right? So that level of interaction, not only on a national level, but also on an international level, I think is very valuable. And if you guys are really interested in that, I definitely encourage you guys to apply to the team. Awesome.
So, thanks everyone. Basically, I think we've gotten through most of the content that we wanted to mention. I'm not sure if anyone, I think we're going to open it to questions and answers. Obviously, feel free. You might have different questions for me, for Doris, or for Jonathan. I think we'd all be happy to answer whatever we could. But if parents, students, anybody has any questions, love to open up the floor to those. So, yeah.
So I guess kind of just generally aimed at whoever can answer it. When would be a good time to try and apply to the national team if you might want to try?
Cool. So typically candidates apply in their grade 10 or grade 11 year. So the way the national team process works is that if you apply in grade 10, you're on the national team for the later part of your grade 10 year and then spanning all of your grade 11 year. And this also works in grade 11, right? So if you apply in grade 11 and you get in, you're technically on the team for the later part of your grade 11 year and then all of your grade 12 year. Typically candidates who make it are in grade 11 when they apply. So I made it when I was in grade 11, so this year actually. I know there are some exceptions where people make it in grade 10. There's even someone who made it in grade 8 a couple of years ago, right? So there definitely are exceptions, but I think that if you feel qualified, you should definitely give it a shot. It's not like if you get rejected one year, you can't reapply the next year. So yeah, if you feel like you're qualified and you feel like you have a good shot, you should definitely just try applying even if you don't make it. Like I didn't make it in grade 10, just as, yeah. So, yeah.
Other questions? Sure. Yeah, so basically the way that the structure works, I'll try to talk individually about each level and then go through basically what they are. So level 1 is very simple. Level 1 is basically my assumption entering the class, and the assumption of all of our teachers is that the people entering the class have never even heard the word debate before. The concept of public speaking and arguing is foreign to them. They've never engaged in fights with their siblings. Basically, we were trying to approach this from the basest possible level to give them most of the basic skills in a few areas. So level 1 is about learning the styles, right? So making sure that they understand like what Canadian parliamentary and British parliamentary are. Learning how to construct arguments. We use a specific system for that most other clubs and schools use as well. And third, basically teaching them some of the fundamental skills about how refutation and other kinds of basic debate stuff works. So that's level 1. Level 2 is, there's a pretty big separation I should start here. So level 1 and level 2, and then level 3 and level 4 are basically, there's a split in the middle. Level 2, we are still going over some of the basics because usually our level 1 classes are somewhere from 8, it can be anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks long depending on whether it's the summer term or the spring term. And so it's unreasonable to expect that at the end of that term that the students, especially given that they're a little younger at this point, have just mastered all of the skills of debating. So by the end of level 1, basically during level 2, we try to refine these skills, make sure that the students basically know and start perfecting those skills, and they start engaging in more regular debates. As soon as students enter into level 2, they will be far more regularly engaging in actual debate rounds, because we find that engaging in debate rounds are some of the most beneficial ways of actually improving. So level 2 is basically just finishing off the skills that we get in level 1, adding in a little bit more content, so trying to get them to learn a little bit more about different issues in the world, whereas in level 1 it'd be more focused far more on just the basic skills. So that's level 2. Level 3, and I often tell people that the jump from level 2 to level 3 is probably the biggest, if not the biggest, then it's certainly one of the biggest. Level 3, we basically start acting as if the students know the basics, okay? They know how debating works, they know the basic skills. These are things that the students understand by this point. So what we're doing at the point of level 3 is a lot more content. So we want the students to be able to basically debate and understand certain issues. We want them to start engaging in basically higher level kinds of skills in terms of debating that we teach, such as framing and other kinds of skills. And a lot of practice, a lot of debate round practice, prepared rounds, things like that. And one other thing that I would mention is one thing about the separation is that one reason that we separate in levels isn't just to do with advancement, but also because we want students to be debating against students that are close to or near their level. Because, and I've been teaching for a while now, one of the worst things that I've ever had happen in my classes is if someone advances too quickly or gets put in a class, and this happened in places I used to work a little more often than I would have liked, if someone gets advanced too quickly and they're put in a class with a bunch of other students that are, you know, expecting a certain level of debate, and it's really, really hard for them in the first class, it can be incredibly demoralizing. I've seen some students, when they've advanced too quickly, against my recommendation, literally quit debating as a result. So it's really, really important to me that the levels are kept so that students get a general level of progression and so that they can get better in an environment that feels comfortable. That it's not all of a sudden getting thrown into the fire and expecting them to succeed in an entirely new environment, right? So that's a big part of it. Level 4 is the second highest that we have, and level 4 basically is even more content, so we're focusing more on the content. Sometimes I'll even assign a similar topic for between two classes for a particular week, right? So from level 3 to level 4 senior, all my 4 classes were talking about slavery in the United States for the last 3 weeks on a particular article. But basically, the complexity of the discussions that I have range by the class, okay? So the complexity of the discussion that I have with level 3, probably less than the complexity of the discussion that I have with level 4 and then level 4 senior. So we're trying to basically just increase things as we go along. And I also try to format the curriculum so that basically if a student takes a level for another time, because we don't, after level 1, we never just immediately advance someone at the end of a semester. It doesn't really work that way with debating. So I ensure that the program doesn't repeat itself, right? So if you take level 3 for a second semester, I'm not just going to be rehashing all the same things that I told you in the last semester, but, you know, doing it like with a different debate topic. It is actual new material, which is kind of hard, but it is something that I think is necessary to help students. Level 4 senior, we try to have basically students that have either demonstrated in class or at external tournaments a capacity to succeed at higher levels. And oftentimes these are older students with a couple of exceptions. And it's like a very high level of debating. I focus much more on practice in this class and on feedback. I've even started, and I will be continuing to actually start doing rankings for that class. Yeah, the senior students that are in the room are happy about that because my usual policy was that I didn't give rankings, but I'm going to start doing that because I think it is helpful. Whereas in classes lower than that, occasionally I will, but I don't like to give a ranking every week because if you're the student that is just trying to learn something and came a little newer to the class and I say, you know, week 1, 4th, week 2, 4th, week 3, 4th, week 4, 4th, it can get a little bit demoralizing, right? Even if you are improving, if you keep hearing 4th, you know, it's not going to get through your head that you're actually improving at a good rate. So that's basically a summary of how the levels work. In terms of how advancement works, it's entirely on a case-by-case basis. We try to ensure that, I mean, and there's obviously a lot of things that we have to balance. We have to balance class size, we have to balance ensuring that the debates are competitive and that students are in the proper place, and obviously accommodate different timing concerns that parents have. But for me, the main concern is that I don't want a student to feel like if they make it to level 4 that it's arbitrary, right? If you make it to level 4, if you make it to level 4 senior, I want it to feel like you actually progress and you made it there beyond just, you know, me getting pestered and someone saying, oh, you have to go to that class, and then I put them up there. I want it to feel like an accomplishment, and I want it to feel like it matters, because I think it does, and I think that it's important that the students are able to practice in those levels. So that's a very, very long explanation, but I think it is actually important, so I appreciate the question. But that's basically how the levels work and how we approach them. So.
Well, actually, I do have a question here. I mean, I often get also maybe during the summer.
Right. So I'll speak to one thing and then I'll pass it on to Doris. Don't waste your summer. It's really important. So you guys can go on vacations. You guys can, play video games in your spare time. That's fine. But actually, you guys actually have to put in the work during your summer when everyone else is going on vacation and when everyone else is, playing and hanging out with their friends. You have to put in the work. So for me, during the summer, it was always a good time to read up on stuff because I didn't have that much homework. To sign up for, debate summer camps, or even to sign up for debate, like a program, but throughout the entire summer. I think LinkedKey also offers some summer programs. But yeah, definitely use the summer to your advantage when everyone else is slacking off.
Oh, so I would definitely agree with Jonathan in terms of using your summer and doing something productive with it. But however, I think I would approach a debate a little bit differently. I think what really helped me in terms of debate is that making sure it's part of your everyday life, right? So like make it a routine. So in the morning when I wake up, I would make sure that I get a notification on my phone to read CNN. Or something like when I wake up in the morning, when I'm at the bus stop, I have 5 minutes of nothing to do, I would watch a debate video or just a speech of someone else and write down 2 or 3 things that I feel like, what makes him such a great debater? Like, what can I do to be better, right? You wake up early in the morning, you have thoughts like that. Or one thing I've done, I think is really helpful, especially for over the summer, is that I think you get this tendency that you want to play video games or you want to do something else, but to budget that time like ahead of time. So I tell myself after lunch, I will watch a movie, but not for today. Like I will watch a debate round. So I plan that in ahead of time, and I just end up watching debates a lot. I think that definitely helps. So definitely plan your summer, take advantage of your summer when everybody else is relaxing. It's important to relax too, but make sure you plan ahead for that as well.
Sure. So just a few last notes on this, because I think this is actually one thing that's very, very important, is as a coach and as a program, we can do a lot to make students better. And I've coached some students that have wanted to do relatively little work outside of the class that have shown a lot of improvement. And I'm not going to discount the ability for students to do that. But I do just want to note that even if you looked at the awards section that we had, whether these are students like Doris, students like Jonathan that have made Team Canada, or even some of our own students, the students that tend to reach the highest levels, it's a lot of extra work. And I'm not going to try and pretend like it isn't. So the things that have been suggested by these other students are really, really important. But insofar as if you are interested in competing for Team Canada, you're almost exclusively going to be competing against people who are wired like Jonathan and Doris, all right? So unless you have supreme, crazy, prodigy level talent that allows you to just not be able to do any of that work and succeed, which we have many, many talented debaters, none of you are like that level. You have to do the work. It's important to actually engage in the hard work that's necessary there. So all of that is really important. The last thing I want to mention just in terms of getting better, and this is something that I literally cannot stress enough, is that you should not view your improvement solely on the basis of how you did at the most recent tournament, because there is a lot of randomness and luck involved in one particular tournament, okay? 6 tournaments in a row? Okay, that's a sample size, right? If you've done 6 tournaments and you've done fairly badly at all 6, I mean, obviously grading for age, right? Like, if you're doing badly and you're in grade 8 or grade 9, you are literally just doing what almost every other grade 8 and grade 9 is doing at high school tournaments. But usually there will be a tournament where maybe one tournament you go and you succeed, right? You do much better. You, for instance, maybe even make a quarterfinal or something, and you're really, really psyched about it. And then the tournament afterwards, you go, and things just go wrong. You get motions that you don't understand. You get a judge that you hate, the worst judge ever, the worst person in the history of people, right? Whatever. These things happen, and so it's important to recognize that debate improvement isn't going to be linear. You're not just going to get, quarterfinalist, then next tournament semifinalist, then next tournament finalist, then champion. It's just not going to work that way. So being aware of that for both parents and students is incredibly important, because it's just not going to happen on a complete linear trajectory. Students will go to one tournament, do well, go to another tournament, and things won't go as well. So that's just something that I want students to be aware of. But make sure that you're doing the prep work, watching debates online, practicing debate, argument generation on your own, all those kinds of things are really important. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So my case, right now, do public speaking. I know this debate lasts long from class.
Mhm.
So my question is just generally how much after class or he has to study per week?
Yeah, so I would say that this does depend on age to a certain degree, right? So if you're a level 1 student and you're just beginning, I think it's asking a little bit too much that they're doing the Jonathan Doris level of like waking up, getting notifications about CNN and reading. That's too much. But the biggest thing at level 1 and at level 2 is that we assign homework weekly for level 1 and level 2. So the students have to do that. And I will say that during my time teaching level 1 and 2 here, that the students have been really, really good about doing the homework. Now, some of my senior students could be a little bit better about completing the homework on a regular basis. Not going to point any fingers or make any eye contact with some students that may be in the room. But for level 1, that's the first thing that I'd suggest, is obviously doing the homework. But after that, in terms of extra stuff that they could do themselves that's still within reasonable parameters, is basically just practicing the skills at the level 1 level that you've already learned. So if we're doing argumentation, so if they're learning pale arguments, which they'll do in the first couple of weeks of a level 1 class, then they should take the initiative to start trying to think of even, it doesn't have to be a specific debate topic even, just an issue, and say, I need to write out a pale argument on this issue, right? So even a couple of hours extra on top of the homework that's already assigned, which usually for level 1 should be no more than about an hour, 2 hours maximum for level 1. And then it ramps up as time goes along, right? So for level 2, then because they already know some of the basics of debating, this is where they can start watching rounds themselves. This is where they can start actually practicing debates and practicing prep sessions themselves. So it does depend on age, but I would just also mention that it's important for parents to be reasonable about where their students are along the line of trajectory and basically line up their goals and what the extra expectations for their children based on what's going on there, right? Because it's important to keep things in line with that essentially. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm kind of curious on this. I mean, for both Doran and Jonathan, how many hours do you guys, you have a number in your mind, I don't know whether you have or not, how many hours do you spend on average, usually during the regular time or maybe before the tournament? Do you have any number in your mind?
To prepare for the tournament?
So prepare for the tournament, or maybe during the your regular.
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about the preparation, throughout the year. So when I started off, it was very, very intensive. Trying to actually master the structure and master the flow of every speech is very time consuming. So if I was to give you a number, it'd probably be around, 4 hours a week, maybe even more, 5 hours. So an hour per day on the weekdays. But then as you slowly begin to familiarize yourself with the style, the way debates flow, what you're supposed to do at specific instances, which comes with practice, it becomes much smoother and much easier, so you don't have to spend as much time on it. So nowadays I only spend probably like an hour and a half to 2 hours a week just reading up on news and making sure that my knowledge is up to date. But the actual debating stuff, the strategy, the stuff that Brent was talking about, that stuff is basically done and out of the way, so it doesn't really need to be hammered home every single week. As for tournament prep, a week before the tournament, I'll definitely review all of my strategy, the debating fundamentals that you need to know for a tournament, and then on top of that, my day-to-day, news and my day-to-day spec that I read, but then also practice rounds. So maybe like 2 to 3 practice rounds before tournament is typically what our debate society does for us.
So definitely building off of Jonathan, I think how I approach debate at the beginning is, I had a very structured system where I would have my Sunday off, which is the day right before school, so before I start to get a bit lazy on Saturday or Sunday. I just try to use that day for debate only, and that's what I did. So during that day, I might pack like 5 to 6 hours of debate, and that'd be the amount of debate I do for the entire week. But that's for the beginning. That's when I didn't know what a speech was. I didn't know who the judge was or where to look at. Like, these are very small things I had to figure out. But once I got used to debate, I think what makes me a little bit strange is that I actually really like watching debates more than I like watching movies. So there would be a Friday night where I come home and I just watch a lot of debate videos, and I really enjoy that. So if I were to give you a number, like maybe 3 hours on a day is like too much, but I just enjoy doing that. Like, if you take the time you spend watching YouTube and you watch debate, I would be doing that. And that's what happens. So it's not a number you should aim for. I would say around 2 hours a week is good. I just tend to do it too much. It's not the best thing.
Just as a quick note on what was just mentioned in terms of the time splits there and basically where students spend their time and how they spend their time. So for tournament prep, you want to make sure, this is really important, is debate is a team activity. So we try, especially when we're sending teams with LinkedKey, we try to get students to connect with one another. If you were wondering why your students are coming home, it's like, why do they have this random person's new phone number? Or why do they have this random person's new email? It's probably because I encourage them because they're going to a tournament together. Preparing with your partner is, in many cases, a part that people actually leave out. Having knowledge and all of that is really, really great, but actually having a rapport with your partner and developing some kind of relationship there. Second thing, and this is a general rule that I can say that is just true, if you want an advantage over every single other competitor at debate tournaments, the 2 topics that you should learn about are, number 1, international relations, and number 2, feminism. Not because those are the most important topics in the world, but because those are the topics that high school students do the worst. So if you do those topics well, you will have many more debates where you're just facing people who are just struggling to give a speech and fill their time. So if you can understand those topics in particular to a good degree, and that's why I focus a lot on international relations and try to bring it up in classes, because just knowing about it can make you survive a round that you wouldn't have otherwise survived. Those are the 2 topics that you should focus on and do some reading about. A lot of debaters read The Economist. That's a pretty popular magazine. I personally prefer The Atlantic as a source of reading. There's a lot of different preferences that go on that, and there's all kinds of websites and different reading that I try to assign and that other debaters do. So those would be my additional suggestions. So.
I think for college applications, they really look for someone with a particular drive or passion. So when you write your college essay, there's the first part, which is called the common application. That's the essay that gets sent to however many universities you apply to, like 5, 6, 8, however many universities you apply to. And for that essay, they generally ask a question like, tell me about one of your passions, or tell me about your background. And when you hear a question like that, they're looking for dedication to one particular subject. And for me, it was DECA and debate. And within debate, you might not want to just talk about debate itself, but you talk about what debate has taught you in terms of public speaking, getting to know more people, right? They want to look for people with qualities like that. They're looking for dedication, and they're looking for people who are very outgoing and people who are motivated. And I think debate as an activity fits all 3 really well. So if you're looking for somewhere to stem your essay off of, I think debate's a very good place to go. And even if you don't write your essay about debate, I think for US schools, just so they see like debate as a qualification, they value that a lot. So they recruit for their own debate teams. But moreover, if they see that you've done debating before, they know that a lot of things you've done is trustworthy, right? If you get a very small award from a not known agency, they don't know whether or not it's true. In fact, they don't know if the agency exists. But if you have done debate at Hart House or University of Toronto, these are big names they all know. It's like university recognized. So they can trust you that you're a qualified candidate. So I think it helps a lot with pushing out other types of competition for people who haven't done very much over their summers, for example, right? So definitely use your summer. It's very helpful.
The only thing that I'd add to that is that both for debating and because I did some essay writing stuff briefly, I've actually talked to admissions officers because I was curious about how this works and about the degree to which they look at this kind of stuff. And it's important to note that a lot of these admissions sort of policies and the way that things have happened have changed over time. For instance, when I applied for school, again, at a prehistoric date, which I will not mention, so because my students are still all guessing my age. So I'm not gonna, but basically when I applied, I got into a few schools. One of them that I got into Yale, but I was an idiot, so I didn't go. But when I applied, and I looked this up, and Doris actually gave me the statistic on this, I believe it was something like 12.6% of applicants were accepted. That number is dramatically lower now, okay? And the numbers for these schools have dramatically lowered over time. Now, the reason that I bring that up in this capacity is because it's impacted the way that admissions officers look at how they take students. Basically, when I applied, because I went to a country high school, I didn't do debating during high school. My best extracurricular was that I attended like a writing club at my school. It was not impressive at all, but I had good enough grades that I was able to get accepted. But now that's just not the case. Having the grades gets you to a certain threshold. You're like a lot of other students. You are now on the same plane as them. So then the school starts asking, well, what kind of student are you going to be when you come to my college? How are you going to interact with the rest of the students on the campus? What kind of additions are you going to make to the kinds of different clubs and activities that we have here? And that's where I think that extracurriculars like debate end up being really valuable. But it's not even just from what you would think of, I won, top speaker at X tournament, ergo look at how smart I am. That's great, and people will obviously be impressed by that. But even just having an essay where it shows that you've been dedicated to something during high school, where literally what you did is that you took your weekends and you went and talked with other people about interventions in other countries and debating about tax policies, that suggests something about you that is attractive, I think, to universities. Even if you don't have a top speaker award or a fantastic achievement, these things, being involved in a club, right? Saying, I started the debate club at my school, or saying that I was an executive of the debate club at my school. These things are really attractive because it shows a certain level of drive to students that is important. And this is especially important for you guys as students because grades, and I'm sorry to burst this bubble for some of you, but grades aren't enough anymore, at least for the schools that we're talking about. It's not going to get you in on its own, with some exceptions, some programs, but even still. So that's basically the main thing that I'd say, having talked to some admissions officers and other stuff. So.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.